You think you have time. You think change happens slowly. You think you will see the collapse coming. You are wrong. Niccolò Machiavelli watched empires that stood for centuries vanish in a single afternoon. He saw princes who ruled with absolute power wake up in chains by sunset. He documented the pattern that most people miss until it is too late. Everything appears stable until the moment it is not, and that moment arrives without warning. Tonight you learn why sudden collapse is not the exception, it is the rule, and the signs that it is coming are already visible if you know where to look. Here is what the history books do not tell you. The Roman Empire did not fall gradually. It collapsed suddenly after appearing invincible for decades. The Soviet Union looked permanent until it dissolved in months. Lehman Brothers was too big to fail until it failed overnight. Marriages that seemed solid end in a single conversation. Careers that felt secure disappear in one email. Friendships that lasted years evaporate over one boundary. The pattern is always the same. Long periods of invisible stress followed by sudden, catastrophic failure. Machiavelli called this the illusion of stability, and it kills more dreams, more kingdoms, and more lives than any enemy ever could. But here is the part nobody explains. The collapse is not actually sudden. It only appears sudden to people who were not watching the right indicators. There were signs. There are always signs. Small cracks that everyone ignored. Tiny shifts that seemed insignificant. Warning tremors that got explained away. The building was failing for months before it fell. But everyone inside believed the walls were solid because they were still standing. This is where it gets dangerous. Your brain is wired to mistake the absence of collapse for the presence of stability. Just because nothing has broken yet does not mean nothing is breaking. Right now, in your life, there are systems that feel permanent, but are actually one bad day from total failure. Think about your job for a moment. How many people got laid off from companies they thought were stable? How many discovered their position was eliminated through an email they were not expecting? They showed up on Tuesday, feeling secure. By Wednesday, they were cleaning out their desk. But here is what they missed. The company had been struggling for months. The profit margins were shrinking. The leadership was having closed-door meetings. The energy was shifting. All the signs were there. But the signs felt too small to matter until the day they fired 300 people before lunch. This is Machiavelli's warning. The prince who ignores small troubles will face sudden catastrophe, not because catastrophe arrives without warning, but because the warnings were too quiet for anyone paying casual attention. Now apply this to your relationships. Every breakup that felt sudden had months of small distance building. Conversations that used to flow naturally started feeling forced. Texts that used to come immediately started arriving hours later. Plans that used to excite started feeling like obligations. But both people ignored these shifts because nothing had officially broken yet. They were still together. So it must be fine. Until the day one person says they have been unhappy for months and the other person is blindsided. Not because there were no signs, but because they were not watching for the pattern that precedes every collapse. Slow, invisible erosion followed by sudden, visible failure. Here is the mechanism Machiavelli identified. Systems do not fail linearly, they fail exponentially. A crack that grows 1% per day feels manageable. It feels like something you can address later. But 1% daily growth means the crack doubles every 70 days. It goes from invisible to catastrophic without ever passing through obviously concerning. This is why everything feels fine until suddenly it does not. You were measuring the wrong thing. You were watching for dramatic change when you should have been watching for compounding small change. The debt that grows slowly until it becomes unpayable overnight. The health issue that feels minor until it becomes emergency surgery. The political tension that simmers quietly until it explodes into violence. Machiavelli saw this pattern destroy kingdoms that believed they had centuries remaining. But here is where most people make the fatal error. They see the signs and they rationalize them. The relationship is just going through a phase. The company is just restructuring. The economy is just adjusting. The body is just aging. They create comfortable explanations for uncomfortable data because accepting what the data actually means would require immediate, difficult action. And humans are spectacularly talented at avoiding difficult action until it becomes unavoidable action. By then it is usually too late. The marriage that could have been saved with one honest conversation 6 months ago now requires lawyers. The career that could have been salvaged with one strategic move last year is now terminated. The kingdom that could have been defended with one difficult decision is now under siege. This is the dark psychology Machiavelli understood. People do not fail to see collapse coming because they are stupid. They fail to see it because seeing it would require admitting they have been ignoring problems they did not want to face, and that admission is more painful than the collapse itself. So they wait. They hope. They rationalize. Right up until the moment everything falls apart. Then they act shocked. They say it happened suddenly. They claim nobody could have predicted it. But someone did predict it. Someone always predicts it. The person who was watching the right indicators instead of hoping the wrong indicators would improve. So what are the right indicators? What should you be watching? Machiavelli identified 7 signs that sudden change is approaching. And these signs work in every domain. Relationships, careers, businesses, governments, even your own mental health. The first sign is when small problems stop getting addressed. Not because they are solved, because people stop mentioning them. When the team stops bringing up the budget issue. When your partner stops complaining about the thing that used to bother them. When your body stops sending pain signals about the injury you ignored. This is not improvement. This is resignation. The system has accepted that the problem will not be fixed. It is now adapting to permanent dysfunction. This is the moment before collapse becomes inevitable. The second sign is when the gap between appearance and reality starts widening. The EIA company posts record profits while quietly hemorrhaging talent. The relationship looks perfect on social media while both people are miserable in private. The government claims everything is under control while riots spread in 3 cities. Machiavelli warned that when leaders start managing perception more than reality, failure is approaching fast. Because reality does not care about perception, reality arrives regardless of the story you told yourself. The third sign is when key people start leaving without explanation. In a company, this looks like your best employees suddenly resigning. In a relationship, this looks like mutual friends slowly distancing themselves. In your personal life, this looks like people you respected quietly removing themselves from your orbit. They saw something you have not seen yet, and they are positioning themselves away from the blast radius. The fourth sign is when decision-making becomes increasingly emotional and decreasingly logical. Leaders start making choices based on ego rather than strategy. Partners start arguing about dishes when the real issue is trust. You start justifying behaviors you know are destructive, because admitting they are destructive would require change. When emotion replaces logic in decisions, collapse is close. Because emotional decisions compound. One bad choice justified by feelings leads to another worse choice justified by doubling down. The fifth sign is when people stop planning for the future. Meetings that used to discuss next quarter now only discuss next week. Conversations that used to include retirement now only include getting through the month. When time horizon shrinks, it means people unconsciously know there is no long-term future for this system. They are not planning ahead because ahead does not exist. The sixth sign is when small incidents create disproportionate reactions. A minor comment starts a massive fight. A small mistake triggers a firing. A routine policy change causes protests. This disproportionate response happens because the system is already under so much hidden stress that any additional pressure causes failure. The structure is so weakened that a feather feels like a boulder. And the seventh sign is the one most people miss completely. When you stop feeling anything at all. When the relationship stops making you angry or sad and just makes you numb. When the job stops frustrating you and just makes you empty. When the situation stops bothering you and just makes you tired. This numbness is not peace. This is your nervous system protecting you from acknowledging that something you built your identity around is about to end. If you recognized even 3 of these 7 signs in any area of your life, understand this clearly. You are not in a stable situation experiencing temporary difficulty. You are in a failing system approaching sudden collapse. And you have a choice right now that you will not have later. You can act before the collapse, or you can react after. Action before collapse looks like having the hard conversation now, making the strategic career move today, addressing the health issue this week, fixing the small crack before it becomes a chasm. This is uncomfortable. It requires admitting something is wrong. It requires facing reality instead of managing perception. But it gives you control over the outcome. Reaction after collapse looks like damage control. Trying to save the relationship after trust is destroyed. Looking for a new job after you were fired. Addressing the health crisis from a hospital bed. Rebuilding the business after bankruptcy. This is not uncomfortable. This is catastrophic. And you have almost no control over the outcome. Machiavelli was specific about this. The prince who acts on small troubles while they are small remains a prince. The prince who waits until small troubles become large troubles becomes a memory. This applies to every system you are part of. Your relationships, your career, your finances, your health, your reputation. Right now, today, there are small troubles in your life. You know what they are. You have been ignoring them because they do not feel urgent yet. But Machiavelli's warning is clear. The trouble that does not feel urgent today will feel catastrophic tomorrow. And tomorrow arrives suddenly. Here is what you do starting now. Make a list of every system in your life. Your primary relationship, your job, your health, your key friendships, your finances. For each system, write down the small problems you have been ignoring. The things that are not crisis level but are not getting better. The conversations you have been avoiding. The warning signs you have been rationalizing. Write them all down. Then ask yourself one question for each item. If this problem compounds for 6 more months, what does the worst case look like? If the answer involves words like divorce, fired, hospitalized, bankrupt, or destroyed, you have just identified a system approaching sudden failure. Now here is the hard part. Pick one, just one, and address it this week. Not perfectly, not completely, but address it. Have the conversation you have been avoiding. Make the appointment you have been postponing. Take the action you have been rationalizing away. Break the pattern of ignoring small troubles until they become catastrophic ones. Because here is Machiavelli's final warning, and let this one sink in properly. Change does not happen gradually in the real world. It happens suddenly. But sudden change is only sudden to people who were not watching. The Roman Empire collapsed suddenly to the Romans, but the barbarians watched it weaken for decades and simply chose the right moment to push. Your marriage ends suddenly to you, but your partner watched it die slowly and simply chose the right moment to speak. Your career ends suddenly to you, but your company watched you become obsolete gradually and simply chose the right moment to cut costs. You think you have time because the walls are still standing, but Machiavelli is telling you from 500 years in the past that the walls were already cracked. You just were not looking at the foundation. Everything is about to happen suddenly, not because change is unpredictable, but because you have been predicting stability when you should have been preparing for collapse. The signs are there. They have always been there. Stop ignoring them. Stop rationalizing them. Stop hoping they will resolve themselves. Address the small cracks today, or face sudden catastrophic failure tomorrow. That is not pessimism. That is Machiavelli. And Machiavelli was never wrong about collapse. He watched too many kingdoms fall to believe in gentle endings. Systems either get fixed or they fail. And failure arrives suddenly to everyone who thought they had more time. You do not have more time you have right now. Use it.